Hello, welcome back to another video. I'm Bones, I write comics, and we're going to talk about comics. So today I'm going to be answering a question that I got on the previous video, and that question boiled down to, have you ever come up with ideas and not turned them into comics? And I think this is a little threefold because yes, there are plenty of ideas that I have not turned into comics, but usually when I'm making an idea to turn it into a comic, I pretty successfully do so. So in the past, what I would do with comics was I would take role plays that me, Ursula, and my high school friends would make together, and I would turn them into comics. So Sovereign, the most amazing comic ever, that was originally an RP between me, Ursula, and our friend Jen. Pretty Mouth, that was also an RP between me, Ursula, and a few other friends. There was a whole cast of characters originally to Pretty Mouth. Like, I think there was a character who had like spiders that would like come out of their mouths and stuff. I don't know. It was a wacky monster boy RP, and we eventually just turned that into Pretty Mouth. Those are actually the only two comics that came from RP. I guess technically 9 Point as well, but we only RP'd it for like a page before we moved on. So when I'm saying RPs, when I'm saying role plays, I've never been one to like tabletop RP. I don't like using like D&D, Pathfinder, GURPS, whatever. I just do text-based role-playing where it's like no rules whatsoever, and we just write ideas, and like one person will write a post where like their characters are acting, and then someone else will write what their characters do, and then we just like move on from there. And that's always been like my style of RPing. So there's been like tons of room to come up with like fanciful, fun ideas. And initially that is where I would start my comics from. And I think I did that because it was a way for me and Ursula to both be invested in the story. But as we've become closer, we've gotten married, Ursula's become like my number one fan, biggest fan of all my work. So now she's just kind of like invested in whatever story I'm writing. I don't tend to turn stories into comics. For one, turning a story into a comic is like such a big time commitment. So I don't do it lightly, but I do like to have fun and create stories. So I still make RPs with Ursula, and I still make tons of characters, and I don't have a lot of intentions of creating them and like making them into like comics or anything. And because of that, they tend to be a lot different. For one, they're a lot less centralized. I don't like to make a very central plot that everything is focused around. I like it to be a more open-ended world where characters can come in and out. It's fine to just like screw off and just do a bunch of fluff RP. It's a lot more fanfic type writing, I guess, where like when you're writing fanfic, a lot of the tropes and conventions of story arcs can be like thrown out, especially in the case of fluff, because there's like this, all of the work, all of the like, the substrate already exists, and you can just kind of do whatever you want. Like, you don't have an obligation to set up a world and tell a main story in it in fanfic, and that's really cool. And that's kind of how I approach role plays nowadays. I also don't care so much about like problematic tropes, because like when I'm writing a story that I want an audience to read, like I want to keep things kind of like balanced out in the tropes department. I want to make sure like my message is strong, that there's good themes or whatever. But like when I'm RPing by myself, I'm just gonna do as many princesses that are magical, as many like fairy kingdoms as I want. I'm gonna do like I love like the rescue the princess, that kind of BS stuff, and like witches and curses for vanity, and I just love all that stuff, and I do incorporate it into my typical work, but I think I just indulge a lot more when I'm just RPing, because it's not something I have to feel like super responsible about. I know like mileage may vary on this, but it's things like having a nice diverse cast or whatever. Like, I don't focus on that too much when I'm just doing like a fun little RP. I don't really think out the world building perfectly, because if things don't line up, like, whatever, it's not a problem that's going to snowball in the same way as if you're writing something where people have to read it or whatever. Like I just want to make mechanisms to do my hurt comfort RPs and just like have a good time and just vibe or whatever, right? That's why a lot of that stuff is just never going to end up as a story, as a comic at least. I have at times taken RPs and started to write them as novels, but they can also be just like so expansive that I don't necessarily even want to deal with it. It's usually just kind of a fun thing to do. And I'm already just so swamped with all the work that I have put on myself. And a lot of the times it's like, why would I write something based on something I've already done with Ursula when I could make something new and just explore that and do something fresh? Because like a lot of the times, honestly, it's like Ursula isn't the fastest at replying to me when it comes to RPs, because I'm a writer. I move a mile a minute when it comes to like coming up with ideas and stuff. So like a lot of the times I will just like take my own story and like start working on that as a novel, because like that's something I can work on my own. A lot of my novels nowadays are just my own stories without Ursula, just because sometimes I just need to entertain myself with some storytelling. And that's the main difference when it comes to me with writing novels versus writing comics. Comics, I just have to be so intentional when it comes to making them into a story, because they are so much work. There's so much commitment to them. Yeah, like Crow Story, my comic Crow Story, like that is completely my own thing. That wasn't an RP, though I constructed it very similar to how I would construct an RP, but I also made the world building a lot more solid, a lot more rigid than I would when I'm just RPing, because it's like, you don't want to make things too rigid into an RP, because then it just becomes like difficult for Ursula to like come up with things that fit within the binds of the story, right? I do have some plans for some of the RP stuff I've done, but it's a little strange, and like they aren't projects that I want to talk about right now, so just let me tease you with those. And yeah, it really just boils down to like comics being so much work, and when I sit down to make a comic nowadays, I'm just very intentional about it. Like 9 Points, I came up with the idea, we did a bit of RPing, and I was like, no, this has to be a story. Like, I want this to be a comic. Like, this is such a great idea for a comic. And I feel like a lot of the characters and tropes just wouldn't be super fun to do as an RP, because it's just not something that me and Ursula want to necessarily RP. But it did speak to me on like a comic level, probably because, you know, it's like, it's about a bunch of like kids like growing up and their place within this larger world and stuff. And that's not necessarily what I like to RP. What I like to RP is like romance, her comfort, you know, like curses, chaos, melodrama. And that's not really what I want to write in a story, right? And that's why I feel like 9 Point really wasn't going to work as an RP, and that's why I very quickly moved it elsewhere. I guess I have just more of a sense for that nowadays. Like a lot of just the stories that I want to tell aren't going to be the kind of stories that I want to RP. There's just like an understandable difference between them for me, where like there's like overlap in like my interests obviously, but like I can tell the difference, right? And I feel like Crow Story could fit as an RP, but I also just think it's just like a fun project for me in terms of world building and creating, and it goes way beyond like what would be fun to do with Ursula, and now is kind of in the territory of like way too much world building, which is something I like to do alone. Yeah, and Avo is something I've been working on forever. Like, it's just always been like my comfort story that I've been writing since I was like a kid. So, and it was originally a novel, and I decided to create a comic version of it because I just want more people to see it and experience it, because it is my baby. And an audiobook snippet should be coming out soon. I shouldn't say snippet, it's just like a part. I'm slowly putting out an audiobook version that follows along with the comic, so you can see the visual and hear Ursula reading the audiobook version at the same time. So you should check that out. That's on my channel. There's a playlist you can start at the beginning, or you could just jump in randomly if you're someone like that. Either way, thank you so much for listening to me ramble. I will see you guys in the next video. Make sure to leave a comment down below. Comic accountability. I love all your comic accountability. You guys get to tell me what you did in your comics today, and I get a comment. It all works out for both of us. And also questions, right? Questions are great. They give me things to talk about, like I am chatting about today. So thank you, and goodbye.